Alrighty, friends, here we go. We're going to learn this really fun thing that is actually a process we already know. We just have to do what we learned backwards. How hard can that be? So this is still talking about 5. We are going to be finding polynomial functions from zeros. So it is the reverse of what we've been doing. So we have learned how to go from a polynomial function to its factors and then to the zeros. And so we're going to just review that quick because I think in order to learn something backwards, it's a good idea to kind of think about what is that like going forwards, like the alphabet. How many of you can say that backwards? Not me. So what we've been doing up until now is finding all of the zeros. In this case, one factor has been given. So keeping in mind that the power of my, or the degree of my polynomial should tell me how many factors I'm expecting. Since this is, let's review, a degree of 3, meaning highest power, that's going to tell me several things. Now, let's just think back to everything we've learned. For one, it's going to tell me that I expect to have 3 factors, 3 zeros. So I expect to have 3 of these, which will lead to 3 of these. Awesome. One other thing it tells me, and just this is going way back, but we're trying to put it all together. If I look here and I see that my leading coefficient is a positive number, think about what that told you about end behavior. With a positive leading coefficient, your right end goes up. All right, then my degree, which is clearly odd at 3, would tell me my left end is going to do the opposite. So when I go to graph these in my later math life, I have to remember what I already know based on the leading coefficient and the degree, but now I know even more. I know that there are 3 factors, and this set of notes was kind enough to give me one. It's saying that x plus 5 is a factor. Like free information, everybody loves free stuff. Keeping in mind that zeros are what make the factor equal 0. Think about what would you have to plug in to make this factor of x plus 5 be 0. So from what we've been learning, that would give me a 0 of -5. I like to keep track of them in this table because as we're going to learn today, then whether I get the factors column and am looking for the zeros or get the zeros column and am looking for the factors, I can just kind of organize and think about it the same way. This is going to be my starting point. So I'm going to do my synthetic division, and I know that I put my little box a different way than Miss Myers, so if you're watching this, don't freak out. When you go to do synthetic division, the thing that goes into the corner or the thing that you are going to be synthetically dividing by is the value that's the 0, not the factor. So be careful that you're using a -5 there, not a +5, because, well, basically that's wrong, and you will get an answer that is also wrong. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take our coefficients from the initial polynomial and we're going to put them in decreasing order, making sure that if we need to, and I'm watching, we would save a spot from by using a 0. But we don't have to because we have x to the 3rd, 2nd, 1st gone. Alrighty. So now those of you who may be in Ms. Myers' class, you might see it like this. Same math, different drawing. Who cares? So easy. Alrighty, so my first big move is to drop the 1. This should not be news. Once it's down below there, box times the bottom bounces up. And then this column just adds together or combines to be, however you like to think about it, 4. Alrighty, box times the bottom bounces up. That's going to be -20. Using those numbers as is, I combine them and get a +3. Box number times the bottom bounces up, and you should feel really happy because that's telling me that that's the remainder when I divided the original polynomial by x plus 5. Well, that's good because they already told me it was a factor, so I expected a 0. So you might be asking yourself, why did we do that? Well, remember what that does is it drops it down to the next power. And once we hit that power of 2, we can either sometimes solve using square roots. Why did I write that? Who knows? I'll make that a z. We can sometimes solve using quadratic formula, but our initial go-to is to say, hey, can I solve this by factoring? And that's the current thing we're working on. So what this now means is everybody's dropped by a power of x because we divided an x out. So now I'm looking at 1x squared plus 4x plus 3 equals that 0. This one is factorable, shocker, since that's what we're practicing. I need to make 3 in a way that can add up to 4. Well, there's not a lot of ways to make 3, so I'm going with 1 times 3. And then I need a positive 4 out of those two, so I'm going to go ahead and do a plus in both cases. So I now have my factors. And if you're thinking she's not teaching me anything new, that's because I'm not teaching you anything new. But I will be. So then from there, I'm able to say, okay, if these are my 3 factors, which is what I expected to get, then -1 is going to be another of my zeros, and -3 is going to be another of my zeros. Now I have my 3 zeros. So for those of you in my class, I did a little foreshadowing a while back and said, hey, we're going to be kind of looking at this in terms of our graphing. And so again, just to kind of give you something to put your brain around during a pandemic when you have nothing else to think about, what this is telling me is that at -1, -3, and -5, this graph is going to cross the x-axis. Those are my zeros, solutions, x-intercepts, whatever you want to call them. Then I go back and I think about this stuff that I learned earlier in chapter 5. So now I know that the right end of my graph, like oopsies, after that last 0 to the right is going to go up. And I can see from my end behavior that the left is going to go down. And so I can kind of just have a better sense of what that graph might look like. And that is ultimately how this will all come together when we get into pre-calc and do some more with polynomials. So we know that process. Let's get to what we're going to do instead. What we're going to do now is we are going to start right here with these. Instead of saying, hey, our zeros are at x equals -5, -1, and -3, we're going to be told what those zeros are. Then we're going to use our brain to go that direction and find the factors. And then instead of using division like we did to get the factors, since we're going the opposite direction, we're going to go ahead and multiply like we did back in 5-3. That might involve some distributing, might involve some foiling to get this end result. So up here, we had to divide synthetically or long division to get our factors. Then we had to use our zero property to get the zeros. Here we know the zeros, we think backwards with our zero property to get the factors, and we multiply because we're doing the exact opposite. This one's kind of a middle ground because this one is starting us with factors. So I currently know if I did my little factor and zero table that 2x squared is a factor, x minus 1 is a factor, and x plus 3 is a factor. So I don't have to find the zeros, but it's good practice to say this one's a 0, and that one counts twice. So I always say that as a multiplicity of 2. We're going to learn that in pre-calc 2, so you might as well plant the seed. It just means that it's repeated twice, multiple times. How many? 2. So then there's a 0 here at 1 and a 0 at -3 because my zeros are always the opposite. So I'm actually starting here in the middle because they told me the factors. So to build my polynomial function, all I really have to do is this multiplying step. So I'm going to have my factors right here, and I'm going to have to multiply them out. So this actually goes back to, I think it would have been our 5-3 worksheet. We did exactly this. I recommended personally that you would FOIL out these, but really you can do whatever you want in terms of the order. So I'd probably go ahead and FOIL these. I believe we are far enough into math that I'll just do that. So there's x squared plus 3x minus lands me at a 2x and then minus 3. So then when I am done, my polynomial function is simply going to be what I get once I distribute that 2x squared to everybody. So 2x to the 4th plus 4x to the 3rd minus 6x to the 2nd, and I am good to go. I have accomplished my goal of finding the polynomial that has those factors. So this last one, which is the whole shebang, says to write the standard form equation of a polynomial function, which is just something that looks like that, with the following zeros. So this one didn't give us the zeros. It took an intermediate step and we started with the factors, but we're so smart now, we're gonna go ahead and start with the zeros. So I like my table because it helps me think of everything in the same way. Ooh, this one's challenging. So now I have to think backwards. What would the factors be so that when I plugged in these three numbers in my zeros column, I would end up with 0. So this one's not that tricky. It would be an x plus 1. Here, x minus 3, because if I plugged the 3 in, I'd get out a 0. Here you might have to do some thinking, but in order for you to use a negative here, you'll need a positive there. And then I'm going to go in here because I'm thinking if I plugged in a half, negative 1/2, sorry, 2 times negative 1/2 would be negative 1, and then plus 1 gives me the zeros. So I started with my zeros. I used my brain and the zero property product to get to my factors. Now I'm going to go ahead and multiply them out to get my polynomials using all the fun skills I learned back in 5.3. So I'm just going to line them up and say, hey, this is my function in factored form. Now I need to go ahead and do some 5(3) and multiply them out. I'm going to go ahead and FOIL these first two. And now I'm going to need to multiply, which will turn into double distributing. Again, this is review from 5(3). I'm going to multiply every piece by 2x, and I'm going to come down here where I have more room. So I'll have 2x cubed minus 4x squared, and then minus 6x. And then I'm going to multiply everything by the 1 because I have to distribute both pieces. So that'll give me an x squared, which I personally just like to line up with the other x squared, then a minus 2x, and then here I'll get a negative 3, draw myself a big fat line, and then I'm going to have my polynomial in standard form because I'll have 2x cubes. From here I'll get minus 3x squared. From here I'll get negative 8x, and from here I'll get minus 3. So our goal really, and that goes up here in somebody else's smaller, neater writing, our goal is to just understand the fluid motion between, hey, if you give me the polynomial, I know how to use division, long division, synthetic division, or just straight up factoring to get my factors. And then once I have my factors, I know how to get my zeros by using the property. But I now learned, hey, if you give me my zeros, I'll go ahead and use my zero product property to think of the factors, and then I'll go ahead and use things like FOIL, distributing, just general polynomial multiplication from 5.3 to get back to a polynomial. So you want to be able to move freely between those three things and understand the relationship between them. So there you go. Hope that makes your life really super easy and your homework even easier. Have a great day.